Good morning. That's my presentation. Okay, I will talk today about the startups from the perspective of investors. What is a subject? Subject is has to assess the value of the startups, because this is more dream than the company, more dream than the income. How to assess the value? That's this agenda. I will talk about what I understand by the startup, what is a commercial value of a startup, how to assess startup commercial value, and I will conclude my talk. That it's a startup. Startup is a young company that just being to develop, but also startup can be the company which is more experienced, but change the product or change the service or introduce a new business model for the operation. That it's if we talk about the startups, we need to talk about the technology readiness level. This is one factor, but we need to also take into account the customer readiness level, how market is prepared for this new product. Then, if we have the customer readiness level 1, it means that we have idea of the product is not known on the market, we need to build the market for the product. If we have the customer readiness level 4, it means that it's a full market, the market window, the product is inside the market window. What it means? That if we have the really startup, we have idea, means that on the technology readiness level, we are on the first level, means that we have the idea, but also we have no market, really market on that. This creates the value of the startups, because if we have the startups and the market is big for the product, we have the better chance to commercialize it. That we have the two risks. This is a visualization of the very hard way of the startups from idea, which is on the left side. Then we should cross the valley of this. This is some technological risk to cross this valley, but also from the business point of view, we have the business risk if we swim by the Darwin Sea. Darwin Sea, it's at this moment which we start to change the business model of the company. It means from the research and development of the product to go to the market, to the production. That what is a commercial value of the startup? It's very hard to determine the company value while it is in its infant stage, as its success or failure remains uncertain. This is more dreams than the real company. Startups don't have a history financial performance on which to base evaluation. In the classical meaning, we assess the value based on some factor like EBITDA, like NPV, like any classical factors. But here, it's impossible to calculate such factors. The startup valuation is more art than the science. But it depends very strongly on the investor goals. We can distinguish three kinds of investors. It's a branch-related investor. They are seeking ideas for their business. They are seeking technologies. They are seeking talents. They see the startups completely from the different point of view than, for instance, the general investor. They are seeking market-oriented startups. They are seeking the startups very fast growing and also the growing of the value of the company. But also we have the third type of investors. This is a government-based investor. They are taking care for the country development. For instance, they are seeking the startups which can develop the given branches of the industry, which are very important for the country. That's how to assess the startup commercial value. There is 7 points which we need to consider. The first is the assessment of possibility of product success. I will talk later more about that. Analysis of the limits in commercialization. We should assess the IP protection and quality of the documentation. This is also a very important factor. And the next point is the analysis of the relation between entrepreneurs and also ownership of the idea. Who is really the owner of the idea of the startup? Then it's an analysis of the required research to achieve successful commercialization. That it's a next very important point, it's a human resources analysis. That it's an assessment of the production model if the startup is oriented to the production. That is an assessment of the possibility of the product success, what it means. We need to assess the technology and market-oriented analysis of the product. We need to check the current technology readiness level. We also assess the product in the relation to alternative products or competitive products. That's the next, it's an assessment of the added value of the proposed solution in reference to the competitors. It's more points. That is an analysis of the limits in commercialization. The main limits is in the business scalability. What it means? It means that in the startup, in the introductory phase of the startup, we have the prototype. We produce only the one product. But to make a business, we need to repeat this process. That we should assess it is possible to scale the production or not in the environment which is proposed by the startups. Okay, this is IP protection. We need to assess of IP protection, but also we should do the prior art search of the patents. But also we need to assess the documentation from the product and technology. Mostly the startup are doing the prototype, not making the documentation of the prototype. They are oriented to make the product, not to make the documentation. But for the scale the business, but develop the products in the future, this documentation is very, very important in every branches of the startup activities. Analysis of the relation between entrepreneurs. This is analysis and transparency of the ownership of the idea and solutions. That's also we need to analyze to assess the value of the startup, engagement of the owners into commercialization process. That is a next step. Next step is the analysis of the research which are needed to successful commercialization. We need to assess the schedule of the planned action. We need to assess the accessibility to the infrastructure and equipment, but also we need to assess the availability of the expert in the field of the startup activity. This is very, very important. That's the human resources, which I see this as a very important. In my opinion, it's the most important because the startups are the people, are the group of people, they are cooperating, they are creating idea, they are developing the product or service. That we need to assess the entrepreneur CV, we need to assess the CV of other staff member, but also we need to assess the surrounding of the startup. What kind of expert we have on the local market to help them to develop the startup. That it's if the startup is oriented to the production, we need to assess the production model, which can be based on the outsourcing or growing the production infrastructure and so on. But conclusions. We can conclude that assessment of the value of the startup is more art than science. That we need to have experience. In my life, I started the 25 startups company. 18 from that are successful, operating still for more than 10 years. It seems that they cross the critical points for the company, and they are market-oriented company. That is a two main tasks for assessment. One, it's a technology assessment, then it's a business model assessment to cross the value of this or cross a Darwin C. That it's a commercial value of the startup is a company depends on the investor goals. As I mentioned, that we have three main investor goals. There is more, but I mentioned only three of them. But for one investor, the startups can be the value 0, but for other can be the value 100. This is a different point of view for such a company. Human resources engaged and the experience and enthusiasm are crucial for successful startup from my experience and should be very carefully assessed. That it's a recommendation should be based on the whole product lifecycle, not only early stage of the product, because we have the early stage of the product, but we need to see it during the assessment also the end of life of the product. Thank you very much for your attention.